A few weeks ago, I did a video on the Congo Crisis. After that crisis, one man was left in charge of the Congo, Joseph Desire Mobutu. Mobutu's regime would quickly turn to authoritarianism, developing a cult of personality and working to consolidate his absolute authority. It is May 30th of 1966 in the Congolese capital of Kinshasa, and a crowd of around 50,000 watches a gallows being prepared in a large public square. Then, four men are marched up to the platform: former Congolese Prime Minister Evariste Kemba and three former ministers of the old republic. Then, the dictator of the Congo, Joseph Desire Mobutu, gives a speech in which he states one had to strike through a spectacular example and create the conditions of regime discipline. When a chief takes a decision, he decides. Period. Then Mobutu watches as his political rivals are executed. Joseph Desire Mobutu was born in 1930 in the small Congolese city of Lisala. Mobutu's father was a cook for a local Belgian judge, but he died when Mobutu was 8, after which he was raised by his uncle. Mobutu had learned to read and write alongside speaking French from the wife of the Belgian judge, and by the time Mobutu moved in with his uncle in Cocohatteville, today Mbandaka, he was fluent in French. In Cocohatteville, Mobutu was enrolled in a Catholic mission boarding school, where Mobutu played sports and ran the class newspaper. In 1949, at age 19, Mobutu attempted to stow away on a boat bound for Leopoldville, but was caught by the priests and forced to join the Force Publique. Mobutu found discipline in the force, quickly rising through the ranks and reading news and books whenever he got the chance. His favorite writings were those of Niccolo Machiavelli, alongside those of Winston Churchill and Charles de Gaulle. Mobutu decided to leave the army in 1956 to become a journalist for the Leopoldville daily newspaper, L'Avenir. In 1958, Mobutu went to Belgium to cover the 1958 World's Fair, but stayed to receive journalism training. In Brussels, Mobutu became involved in the Congolese independence movement, becoming friends with activist Patrice Lumumba and becoming his personal aide. When the Belgians finally held talks on Congolese independence, Mobutu was there, and he would have a hand in building the new government. Mobutu was given the position of Secretary of State. When the Force Publique mutinied in July of 1960, it was Mobutu negotiating with the mutineers. Afterward, Mobutu was awarded the role of Army Chief of Staff and promoted to Colonel. When Lumumba felt forced by the Western nations' negligence to take aid from the Soviet Union following the outbreak of violence and the invasion of Belgian paratroopers, Congolese President Joseph Kasavubu ordered Lumumba deposed and for Mobutu to arrest Lumumba, while Lumumba ordered Kasavubu deposed and ordered Mobutu to arrest Kasavubu. Mobutu decided instead to launch a bloodless coup, establishing a new government of university graduates, placing Lumumba under house arrest, where he escaped, and then placing Kasavubu back as president. Lumumba attempted to flee to Stanleyville to rejoin his followers, but was captured by UN peacekeepers, then given to Mobutu's men, then given to the Katangan secessionists, then executed. And if this all sounds complicated, that's because it was. When Mobutu thought his new government would also fall into chaos following disagreements between Prime Minister Moise Tshombe and Kasavubu, Mobutu decided he didn't much like democracy anymore, giving a speech before a large crowd at Leopoldville's main stadium, declaring that since politicians had brought the Congo to ruin in 5 years, it would take him at least that long to set things right, and announcing an end to political activity for the next 5 years. Mobutu's new regime presented itself as anti-political while publicly executing political rivals. In 1966, Mobutu designed the Corps of Volunteers of the Republic to bring popular support behind him, proclaiming himself the second national hero of the Congo after Lumumba. Mobutu presented himself as Lumumba's successor, despite playing a large role in Lumumba's death. In 1967, Mobutu designed the Popular Movement of the Revolution, or MPR, which was the nation's only legal political party until 1990. The same year, all trade unions were consolidated into one, the National Union of Zairean Workers, or UNZA. Independent trade unions were illegal until 1991. By 1970, all threats to Mobutu's authority had been squashed. The same year, King Baudouin of Belgium visited Leopoldville, which had been renamed to Kinshasa in 1966 to distance the city from its colonial past and Africanize the city. Along with this, Stanleyville became Kisangani, and Elizabethville became Lubumbashi. In October 1961, the entire country was renamed to Zaire. In 1972, Joseph Desire Mobutu changed his own name to Mobutu Sese Seko. He also attempted to declare himself president for life, but failed. By 1977, Zaire was experiencing an economic slump due to Mobutu nationalizing firms that were formerly foreign-owned and handing ownership to friends and family, leading to heavy corruption. Mobutu decided that he needed to attempt to bring foreign investments back into the country. The same year, Katangan rebels invaded from neighboring Angola in the first Shaba invasion. This was repulsed by French-Moroccan paratroopers, but the rebels invaded again in larger numbers the next year, causing the French and Belgian militaries to intervene. Mobutu spent most of his time working to increase his private fortune, with his estimated net worth being $5 billion by 1984. Most of his money was held out of country in Swiss banks. This was almost the amount of Zaire's foreign debt at the time, with the nation defaulting on its loan from Belgium in 1989. Mobutu owned a collection of Mercedes-Benzes, which he drove between his opulent palaces, while his people lived in slums and infrastructure deteriorated. Mobutu and his allies sucked the nation dry of money, and the only adequately paid workers were the Presidential Guard. Mobutu cruised on his yacht, the Kamanyola, up and down the Congo River. He built in Gabdelite a palace dubbed the Versailles of the Jungle. Mobutu chartered a Concorde plane from Air France for shopping trips to Paris. Mobutu gave close family and friends government positions and groomed his son, Nyewa, to be his successor. However, Nyewa died of AIDS in 1994. Mobutu also built a cult of personality that is nearly unmatched, with the evening news depicting him descending from the clouds like a god. His portrait was hung in public places and on pins that were worn by government officials. He held titles such as Father of the Nation, Messiah, Guide of the Revolution, and Savior of the People, among many others. And at one point in 1975, the media was not allowed to refer to any names other than Mobutu's. In 1990, with the ending of the Cold War and following an economic crisis and domestic unrest, Mobutu was unable to use his anti-communist stance to justify retaining power, and in May, Mobutu agreed to give up his monopoly on power, appointing a transitional government and promising elections, but retaining power. However, his soldiers, upon not being paid, decided to riot, causing Mobutu to bring opposition figures in for a coalition government, but Mobutu still schemed to retain power. By 1993, factional divisions in the new government led to the establishment of two governments, one pro-Mobutu and one anti-Mobutu, led by Laurent Masengwa and Etienne Tshisekedi of the Union for Democracy and Social Progress, or UDPS. Mobutu appointed Kinga Wadando as his prime minister. By 1994, the economic situation in Zaire was still dismal. The government was fractured, and Mobutu Sese Seko was becoming a frail old man. During one of Mobutu's trips to Europe to receive medical care, Tutsis from Rwanda captured a large portion of eastern Zaire and would lead to a war that would rock African history to its core.